So here's my question for you, man, because I feel like we've now seen a good run of Brooks Lee, who tends to start slowly at a level and then kind of slowly heat up and then just start to scorch it and move on to the next one. Is he the most likely high caliber Twins prospect to be traded this offseason? And if he's not, and he stays with the organization, what do you see as his best position defensive fit in the infield?
I mean, I guess the way you worded the question, I'd have to say, yeah, he would be. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. I think that's because a lot of teams would love to have Brooks Lee. I think a lot of teams would look at him as a trade target because he has such a high floor. If you are a GM trying to make a trade and you want it to work out, you want to look good. And oh, by the way, a guy who's in AAA, that's a really good name that's going to come across. And, I think he can play shortstop. I think he's probably much better fit at third base. And I think he could be a really good third baseman. Second base would be on the table too. I think teams are going to ask about him. I don't know if we want to get off on this tangent, but I think teams are probably going to ask a lot about Edouard Julien too. But the Twins haven't really dealt. We talked about all the guys that the Twins have dealt. They haven't really dealt from the top of the system other than Chase Petty. But he was not even in the system yet.
Right.
Almost. You have to go back to Matt Garza, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He had debuted, or Wilson Ramos. I mean, those are the two that stick out to me. But other than that, it's all these big names and they don't move them. And I love it. But prospects are cool.
Yeah, and so I think the conversation naturally goes to the MLB infield situation, like you said, and I think the obvious option out there is to trade Polanco
for sure.
And I think that's probably the things that's going to get the most steam. But again, I will not fall out of my chair if Edouard Julien is not on this team on opening day, and it's not anything against him. I love him, but I think teams are going to ask about him a ton. Because the Twins are going to call up teams, hey, you want Jorge Polanco? They're going to say, well, what about that guy?
Yeah.
Right.
And we know Derek Falvey. He's going to have that conversation. He's not going to say no. And if somebody's going to have to give up a ton, it would take a ton. I think the Twins like him a lot. But he has some – I know we're talking about Brooks Lee, but
Brooks Lee is what makes this conversation a possibility.
Exactly.
Right? Because Jorge Polanco and Edouard Julien and Brooks Lee could all fill second base, right? If Royce Lewis is filling third and Carlos Correa is filling second and Alex Kirilloff is filling first, you have three legitimate big league options at second base. And I'd trade any of them for the right pitcher.
Yep.
Okay, so then let me ask this question then, just to rubber stamp it. And Tom, we are always down for tangents no matter what. Rank Polanco, Julien, and Lee in order from most likely to least likely to be traded this offseason.
I would put it Polanco most likely, Lee second most likely, Julien least likely. But I just think other teams are going to look at Julien and ask about him a ton. And tangent wise, he's maybe a great example to call out too of, when I said earlier about how there's not a lot of guys you would project to have, hold down a spot in the major leagues for 5 years, be an all-star. And, Edouard Julien wasn't a guy that not that long ago I would have said, oh yeah, that's a guy who's going to be a major leaguer for, have a nice career, maybe potentially even be an all-star caliber player. And he's doing it now from what we've seen. So you never know who's going to elevate themselves as they kind of move up the rank. But Brooks Lee, I do think the Twins would be open to moving him too, because again, there's that great infield depth. As far as how the pieces work, Correa is not going anywhere, and if you ask me who is the best fit at third base, I'm not sure I would say Royce Lewis out of that group, but Royce Lee's at third base. He's already there. You have him there. He's perfectly fine there. I think he's good defensively there. Just leave him there and work everything else around him. Even if you think Brooks Lee would be a better defensive third baseman, which I think maybe that there was a conversation to be had there, I still would just have whoever comes up next, You're going at second base because that is Royce Lewis's spot. We're keeping him there. But Brooks Lee, I still like him a lot. I've never thought about moving him down, below Emmanuel Rodriguez, who I like. So I do like Brooks Lee. I don't want to kind of drag him through, but yeah, and I think he's going to have a long, successful MLB career. But is he going to be an all-star type guy? I'm not really sure. So it's like I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of this guy. But I also think if you're the Twins, if you're Derek Falvey, and you're in this situation where your hands are kind of tied with the payroll, you kind of have to figure, and your window is wide open at the major league level. You kind of have to figure out, well, how do we keep this going? And trading Brooks Lee might be what has to be what happens. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel like the like production comp that we've talked about on here for Lee maybe is like weirdly like Jorge Polanco, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a 2 to 3 win guy most seasons. Occasionally he'll have like a great season like that. What was it, 2019, where Polanco was like an all-star and he had a 4.5 win season. Like he'll pull one of those out, but most of the time it's just like a solid above average regular.
That actually works defensively too, because it's like, could he play shortstop? Yeah. You could have him play shortstop in the major league level, but you're probably always going to have somebody better than him at shortstop.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say one thing, because to add to that, kind of the intangible part too, where Jorge Polanco not in the lineup, it was like, okay, we could use Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco comes back in the lineup, isn't like killing it, but the whole lineup seems to get better with his presence. And Brooks Lee's kind of got that same type of thing too. You're going to take good at bats. You're not going to make silly outs. You're not going to run it outs on the bases. Like, just adding that type of thing makes sense to me.
A big thank you to the guys at Destination The Show. Had so much fun. We talked for over an hour and a half, so go check out the full episode. It's available here on YouTube. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. I'll put a link down in the description. Thanks so much for watching this video. We'll talk again soon.